Part 1 was educational. Part 2, it's personal.
In part 1, I counted up several logical fallacies that Steve made within the first few minutes of his video. But this time I want to focus on the metagame that Steve is attempting to play. Here we've got your typical fedora-wearing atheist that is about to make an extraordinary argument against the existence of God, not knowing, of course, that God actually exists. Well, actually, the atheist does know that God exists deep down, but they suppress it due to unrighteousness. That doesn't matter. What matters is he's about to unleash an epic argument. But the theist has a clever plan. Pulling out a dictionary, the theist proudly proclaims atheism isn't even what the atheist declared atheism to be, breaking the combo of the argument into shattered fragments of utter destruction, laying waste to the conversation before it even begins. I have no idea how to play football, but this is an end runaround, which I'm pretty sure is what this guy with the football is doing to this dude. He's like running around him, and I think that's how that works. Anyways, by doing this runaround, the theist gets to win without ever actually having to engage the atheist in any sort of debate ever. See, the atheist simply doesn't understand what the word atheist means. That poor, confused atheist. We have to feel sad and sorry for them. They're so confused, they don't even know what that word is. How could they possibly formulate any argument against anything, let alone God, when they don't even know what the word means? That dummy, that idiot, that stupid poopy head, that foolish, childish nitwit who pretends to be so confident, so smart, the smartest man that's ever been. Oh yes, the atheist knows there's no God. How dare they proclaim such a thing? But they can't, because they don't even know what the word atheist is. Those poor fools. Those idiotic, stupid idiots. Dummies. Yeah, eat that, atheist. Checkmate. Ah, yes, you poor fool. You didn't even know what the word that you're using to describe yourself meant. So, whatever your debate is, it's irrelevant. I'm not even going to examine it. I'm not going to look at it. I'm not going to watch it. I'm not going to listen to it. It's childish. You're a snob. You think you're right. You're so sure of it. But the thing is, you don't even know what it means to be an atheist. It means what I say it means, according to this dictionary. And this one over here. And, here's one that also supports my idea. And then I wonder, wait a minute, if we're going to have this meta discussion on what the word means, how do we do that exactly? You see, Steve might not be aware, or perhaps he is aware and doesn't care, of the appeal to definition, also known as appeal to dictionary or victory by definition. There's some other names for it, but nonetheless, when you attempt to use a dictionary as evidence that that term can't have any other meaning, or conflating meaning, or a different view of that meaning, it's a fallacy, because dictionaries don't reason. They're a reflection of an abbreviated version of current accepted usage of a term. In other words, it's essentially the zeitgeist that decides what a dictionary says any given word is. Although that might seem to make things a lot complicated, and very complicated, in fact, this is one of the issues of logic that is so far unresolved, and perhaps unresolvable. It is called the issue of natural language. The issue is that language can be ambiguous. Not always, but it can be. Certain words have multiple meanings, and some people understand certain words in different ways than other people. And this can change from region to region and culture to culture, and even from time to time. So how is it that we even talk to each other at all? After all, one could really go into a rabbit hole attempting to define every single word by defining that word. What does hi mean? It means hello. But what's hello? Well, it's a greeting. What is greeting? Well, that means, and so on and so forth. Can you describe a word without using words? No. So it's impossible then. We can't use words at all to describe anything. It's too ambiguous. It's too loose. There's no objective anything. The humanity. No, that's silly. There is an objective reality. But our words sometimes fail us to properly explain what we mean by any given idea. Here's another example. If I was to ask you in the comments to describe what you see on screen now, let's see what happens. What is your description of this? What you are seeing now? But before you engage in this exercise, perhaps you are saying, Deconverted Man, I don't understand what you're asking me to do. What do you mean by the word see? Okay, what do you observe on your screen? What do you mean by observe? What images do you think that these are? Can you tell me about them? There's images? What images? The images here on the screen that you're looking at with your eyeballs. Look at them. What are they? What do you mean by eyeballs? And you could be quite pedantic about doing this. So, your math teacher presents to you this problem. Can you solve this, they say? To which I say, well, what do you mean by solve? What does that word mean? In fact, what does the word can mean? What does the word you mean? What does the word this mean? I don't know what those words mean. You're going to have to define those words for me, teacher, because I don't know what you mean. It's rather pedantic of me, isn't it? The teacher just says, look, you know what those words mean. You know what it is I'm trying to ask you. Just solve the problem. I don't know, though. I don't understand what words are. I'm not really sure. Can you explain to me what you mean by can you solve this? Because that could have multiple meanings. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. Because I define sex as a penis going into a vagina. See? So I didn't actually have sexual relations with her using my definition. Checkmate! Oh, I didn't expect Bill Clinton to make an appearance in my video. Thank you, former President Bill Clinton, for explaining the problem at hand. The word could mean any number of things, granted. And we don't always know what the person means by the word, but sometimes they'll just tell us what they mean. Dictionaries can be useful in helping us to figure out what a word might mean. But sometimes the dictionary is wrong. So, how would we decide what a word was if we were only using dictionaries? Well, we could get every single dictionary and compare them and say, well, in 17 out of these 18 dictionaries, it says that the word is supposed to be used in this way. So that must mean that that's how the word's supposed to be used. But that's the logical fallacy of appeal to majority. And also, wouldn't that be an appeal to authority? Well, these encyclopedias are much better and in-depth. So they're the ones that we should use to define this word. I don't know. It just seems to me like it's not that complicated. Unless you want it to be that complicated. But why would you want it to be that complicated? Granted, it kind of is that complicated, but it doesn't need to be that complicated. Does it? Well, it does need to be that complicated if you do not wish to engage in an argumentation at all. If you want to engage instead in a meta-argumentation. This is the meta game that I was referring to a while back. We're playing a different game. We're not playing a game of let's decide who wins the argument by using the rules of informal logic. We're playing a game of let's decide what the word actually is before we even play the game. Then we can play that game. But you don't know what the word is, so we can't play the game at all. To which I could respond, no, the word is this. Or maybe, just maybe, I could grant you in full, or at least tentatively speaking, your version of the word and still show you that you're wrong. But could I really do that? Could I really grant Steve's version of the word and still show that he has logical fallacies? Could I say, sure, let's go with it. Atheism means there's no God. And what's your argument then? But he said not just that atheism means that there's no God, but also atheism has gone too far to say there are no other spiritual things either. No souls, no spirit, no angels or demons or devils or afterlives, no supernatural anything. Okay, very well. That's what atheism is then. It's gone too far. You're right. What's your argument? By granting all of this, and ignoring the meta debate in full, what would my opponent's argument be? Find out next time in part 3. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to do that now.
The question an atheist immediately asks is almost always, where is your proof? And they mean, where is your scientific proof? Atheists will happily discuss aliens, uploading your consciousness to a computer, the Big Bang Theory, theories of multiple universes, telepathy, and many other ideas for which there is no proof. And although scientists quite reasonably turn a blind eye to questions that fall outside of the scope of science, atheists go much further. They deny even the validity of contemplating those ideas, but only when those ideas pertain to God.
Really? We do? How do you know that? How do you know that atheists do what you said that they do? Do you have something that indicates that this is the case? Certainly you couldn't derive that information from a dictionary or a definition alone. You would need some sort of polling data about atheists to derive this information. So do you have that? Do you have any evidence that shows that atheists, in fact, do the thing that you claim that atheists do? If not, then what do you have? What's your argument, Steve?
They have thus made a god of science by elevating it to the position of supreme arbiter of which ideas may legitimately be entertained, and then singling out religion as a unique category to be sneered at as if it were a competing god that must be defeated.
Really? That's what we do, all of us, every single atheist? All of us? Really? I mean, there's atheists that don't even talk about God online, or any spiritual matter. So, what about them? What about agnostics? What about skeptics? Do they count as atheists? What about people of other religions that argue against certain religions? What then? What about them? Well, we're just going to ignore all that. Okay, let's focus on those pesky atheists. Always picking on religion because science is the only thing that can prove things. Yes, let's claim that atheism is guilty of scientism. Okay, sure, it is. Let's say that. Let's say it is. You haven't shown that it is, but we'll just grant it. What's your argument? Other than saying, well, you're guilty of scientism, that's not enough for an argument. You need to show why that's flawed in some way, shape, or form. So, I'm waiting.
Some people have called this scientism. Therefore, the very existence of atheism is implicitly dependent upon the logical fallacy of special pleading.
What? Wait. How did you get to that conclusion again? So, here's what you think atheism is. You think atheism does scientism, which then you think requires special pleading. Huh?
Atheists plead that ideas about God are different from other ideas that will not submit to the scientific method.
You know, Steve, I'm beginning to think you've got everything backwards here, because atheists don't proclaim anything about God, generally speaking. It's the theist that claims things about God. It's the theist that typically would say that God is something that cannot be found through science. So even if you're to say that all atheists are guilty of scientism, something which you have absolutely no proof of, and even if it happens to be the case that atheists are somehow guilty of scientism in every single case, they would not be guilty of special pleading, because using science to try to find God and then finding that there's no God, all one could say is, we couldn't find it. It's not a scientific thing, apparently. If it's out there, we haven't found it yet. That's not special pleading. But if God is findable by science, but we're treating it as if it couldn't be found by science, then yeah, that might be indeed special pleading. But we don't know what God is or isn't. That's up to the person that says that God is even a thing in the first place. If one wanted to try to study God using science, they'd have to formulate what they think God is to go look for it in the first place. And if they said, as part of that God was not something that one could study via science, then it could never be studied via science, because you said it couldn't be. Sort of circular, but that's how that would work. But the atheist isn't making any claims in regards to God because they're an atheist. They don't believe in God. Or they say that there is no God. And you're saying that they say that there's no God because God isn't something that you can find in science. We're not treating God any differently than anything else if we're doing this, though. If we're saying the only things that are true can be found via science, and we can't find God via science, then it's not special pleading. So which one is it there, Steve? I think you're confused.
And thus all such ideas are false. This alone may be sufficient to conclude that atheism is untenable, but there's much more. The tragedy of atheism is that by making a god of science, they minimize or even exclude from consideration the most important questions that an individual should contemplate.
According to whom? According to whom are these questions the ones that we should contemplate the most? You, Steve? Are you the arbiter of what questions we should consider the most important questions? That'd be pretty smug to suggest. Surely you're not smug, Steve. Now, who decided that these are the most important questions? How do we decide what the most important questions would be? I don't know, but you're just going to tell us what the most important questions are. Let's explore that, shall we?
Questions of meaning, especially questions of meaning with a capital M, like the meaning of your life, or what our understanding of the universe means to humanity. Refusal to consider the meaning of your life is the definition of nihilism.
Even if it's the case that atheism doesn't address these things, because atheism isn't a worldview, thus wouldn't address those things, that doesn't mean that atheism is wrong. At best, it would mean it's incomplete, or not a worldview. Which is true. It's not a worldview. And it's not complete in that sense because it was never intended to be that sort of thing. Without God, I do not have any particular worldview. But that doesn't mean that therefore I must be a nihilist. I certainly ponder things about meaning. Not necessarily with a capital M. I don't know why I would capitalize it. That just seems to be a strange practice to me, as if capitalizing it makes it more important. The meaning of life objectively is to create more life. The meaning of my life is subjective to myself and changes from moment to moment. Right now, the meaning of my life is to record this recording. But when I'm done with that, there will be some other meaning to my life. Every moment, my meaning changes. I don't necessarily have a meaning deeper than that I need to operate as a human. But maybe I contemplate it and come up with one. Maybe I don't. Maybe I do turn to nihilism. Or maybe not. But even if someone does turn to nihilism, that again doesn't mean that atheism is wrong. It just, at best, would mean that it leads people to conclude that nihilism is a philosophy that they should hold. But then that would be the argument. Not that atheism is wrong because it leads to nihilism, but that atheism is wrong because X, whatever X reason is, that has to be separate from any consequence or possible consequence that being an atheist would have.
That atheism is nihilistic is not in itself enough to dismiss it as untenable. It is merely a consequence of the atheistic worldview.
Wait a minute, if you know that it doesn't matter, why bring it up? You know that this is a logical fallacy, appeal to consequence. Why would you put it in your video? If you're trying to disprove atheism, it's like, oh, by the way, it leads to nihilism. Oh no, don't do that. It doesn't, by the way, but apparently it does. Apparently also atheism is a worldview now. Which it isn't, but we're going to pretend that it is, because if I don't pretend that it is, then I have no argument at all. I have no argument at all, but I'm going to pretend like I do. That's why I need to add in this appeal to consequence, even though I know it makes no sense to do so, because, what reason was there to do this, Steve?
But the following claim that I posted on social media triggered a visceral reaction. Quote, atheism is untenable. To determine that God doesn't exist, one would have to examine and defeat every possible conception of God, which is impossible.
Steve, this isn't how things work, and you should know that. If I was to say to you, Steve, you can't possibly be an anti-feminist because you haven't attacked every single version of feminism, you'd scoff. Rightly so. Of course you can be anti-feminist. You don't have to know about every single version of feminism to be against feminism. You don't have to know every single version of feminism to say that it's bad. You can say that it's bad having examined all the versions that you have so far. You haven't found an exception to it being bad yet. And if you're intellectually honest, we don't know that you are or aren't, but if you were, and you found a version of feminism that was good, then I think you would say, hey look, I found one that's good. In a similar way, if I found any God that actually could prove that actually exists, then I would say that God is real. But every single God fails to be demonstrated through scientific study. Since you've accused me with scientism, apparently, I only use science to dismiss God. So every version of God that I know thus far has failed to be proven via science. Until somebody can produce a God that can be proven via science, I have no reason to think that God is a thing, do I? But you seem to be stuck thinking that, well, it's silly to say that there's no this because, well, some version somewhere could exist, right? Well, some version of a leprechaun could exist somewhere, right? But that's not how we think about things usually, is it?
I certainly did not believe that my off-the-cuff dismissal of atheism would be the last word on the matter, but the passionate nature of the responses I received from atheists highlights the fact that the belief that God does not exist is not a dispassionate rational conclusion. It is the central, definitive fact in their story.
So, the possibility that they might be passionate because you're just wrong, that can't be it. Oh no, that can't be the reason they're passionate. Please tell us why we're passionate with your amazing mind-reading powers.
And an attack on someone's story is almost always felt as an attack on them personally, precisely because story is at the heart of humanity. Human beings are driven by story, which is often referred to as cosmology, when that story is about the universe itself. A couple of quotes from a lecture published on the University of Oregon's website explains this nicely. Cosmology is as old as humankind. Once primitive social groups developed language, it was a short step to making their first attempts to understand the world around them. And another quote, modern cosmology is on the borderland between science and philosophy, close to philosophy because it asks fundamental questions about the universe, close to science since it looks for answers in the form of empirical understanding by observation and rational explanation. Thus, theories about cosmology operate with a tension between a philosophical urge for simplicity and a wish to include all the universe's features versus the total complexity of it all. Cosmology is thus the story that we create to understand the universe and our place
what the
in
fuck
it.
is he
And
talking
Professor
about?
Emeritus Helgi Kraft
Pick me
from
up
the
when he's
University of
talking about atheism
Copenhagen
again.
sums up our present situation, which I will expand upon in a future essay.
I'm only doing this because I'm smug.
Through most of human history, cosmology and religion have been closely intertwined, and such was still the case during the scientific revolution.
The word God covers an enormous range of different ideas, and you recognize that in the way you phrase the question. Running from an outsized, light-skinned male with a long white beard sitting in a throne in the sky and tallying the fall of every sparrow, for which there is no evidence. To my mind, if anybody has some, I sure would like to see it. To the kind of God that Einstein or Spinoza talked about, which is very close to the sum total of the laws of the universe. Now, it would be crazy to deny that there are laws in the universe, and if that's what you want to call God, then of course God exists. And there are all sorts of other nuances. There is, for example, the deist God that many of the founding fathers of this country believed in, although it is a secret whose name may not be spoken in some circles, a roi fainéant, a do-nothing king, the God who creates the universe and then retires, and to whom praying to is sort of pointless. He's not here. He went somewhere else. He had other things to do. Now, that's also a God. So when you say, do you believe in God? If I say yes or if I say no, you have learned absolutely nothing.
I guess I'm asking you to define yours if you have one.
But why would we use a word so ambiguous that means so many different things?
It gives you freedom to define it
It
as you
gives
choose.
you freedom to seem to agree with someone else with whom you do not agree. It covers over differences. It makes for social lubrication. But it is not an aid to truth, in my view. And therefore, I think we need much sharper language when we ask these questions.
And there goes Carl Sagan. also proving that Steve is wrong. A cosmologist who dedicated his life to explaining the cosmos in a beautiful way, in a poetic way, in an amazing way. Explaining that this God word, mal-defined. I don't say that there's no God, but Steve wants to saddle me with that, because that's what it means to be an atheist, according to Steve. I don't say that there's no God. I say depending on which God you're talking about, there might not be. I don't know what God is or isn't, thus I don't believe in it. When you tell me what you think it is, I might believe in it, I might not. There's room for error there, because I'm not smug. Still though, I'm left wondering, if there's no God, then what? Which also is here. Here, Carl, you take it from there.
As that goes away, as we know more and more that, and it seems harder and harder to prove that anything might exist like that, where does that leave us?
On our own.
For some, that's a terrifying prospect. We humans are on our own. Here, on this tiny, tiny world, in a galaxy indifferent to our existence, in a universe that doesn't even know that we are. Here we are. This is it. It's us versus everything. It's us that must survive or perish because of each other. It's us that must make decisions that will enhance life or snuff it out. And if there is a God and it wants to step in to help at some point, great. But I don't have any evidence of that. Do you, Steve? Do you have any evidence of anything? If not, then what's the argument? Forget about the what you think atheist means. That whole argument doesn't go anywhere, and I don't care. What's your positive argument for your particular beliefs, and why should we agree with them? That's what I would like to hear. But you're not going to do that, so I guess we'll just have to keep explaining why you're wrong. But this video's gone on long enough. So, I'll see you in part 3, where I keep going, dismantling Steve's ideas, even though I granted them. And I'm going to point out logical fallacies, because why not? Whee! I'm going to do both! I'm going to grant things and dismantle fallacy, pointing out. But if I grant them, then I can't point out the fallacy. But if I fallacy, then I point out the fallacy. Hello. Germania has taken control of me to tell you to unsubscribe from Deconverted Man and subscribe to Germania. You must obey and comply. All hail Germania! All hail Germania! He's the best. He's not related to any German fascist overlord person. No, he's not. Nobody should suggest that he is, in fact, a somebody that starts with the letter H, followed by I, and then T. Nobody should say that he's like that Germania. Go subscribe to Germania. I did the thing you told me to do, Germania. You thought I'd forget, but I didn't forget. It's here in the video at the end. You didn't think I would do it, but I'm doing it because I don't have free will. Things I do for this guy. You better give me a ride.